Hello, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and you are very welcome to this February garden tour. Now it's the end of February. It has been an absolutely dreadful spring so far. It's been dry at times, but there's been so much wind and so much storm damage, and then it was wet. So dry, wet, wind. You know, what can you do? However, I've gotten out and about and done some of the jobs that need to be done in early spring, which I'm going to share with you today, show you what I've been up to, and just show you also what's looking good in the garden at the moment. There'll also be a couple of updates on projects I've had before, so tulips and daffodils that I planted in pots in the greenhouse. We'll be having a quick look at them, and also, oh yes, don't forget my crocus lawn that I planted last autumn. So let's get on with the video. It's still very early in the season, but already we can see the first signs of spring, the very first buds and flowers to grace our dormant gardens. Today we're going to take a look around my garden in February and talk a little about what has to be done now and what's looking good so very early on. Firstly, you should know that I live in Southern Ireland and my climate roughly equates to hardiness zone 9. We don't use hardiness zones here in Ireland, but take that as a rough guide. We are essentially on the edge of winter and the windy day is making its presence felt. But what is notable is structure in the garden. Evergreens like the box balls and box circle around my cherry blossom tree provide greenery and interest all through the winter and an important backdrop to flowers in summer. In this area we have a bed of box balls or boxes, cloud pruned into mounds. Their asymmetry is part of their charm, and eventually they'll all join together to form an undulating cushion of green. This area was hit by box blight a few years ago, but responded well to an application of the fertiliser called Top Buxus, and the blight seems to have gone. Another evergreen that looks good through the winter is this Conifer. It's a cedar tree, and we've recently removed some of the lower branches, a job that needs doing in winter. See how he's rocking his new look. Just to the right is a circle of box, and here you can see one of the results of our wet winters. There's lots and lots of moss in the borders and beds in the garden. Unfortunately, the snowdrops have all but faded, and this bed here is my main snowdrop display. It really did look fabulous a few short weeks ago. I grow the common snowdrop or Galanthus nivalis in my garden, although there are many different types, each with slightly different green markings and some costing hundreds of euros a bulb. You'll notice some very bare looking branches here, and these shrubs are elder. I grow several dark-leaved elders or sambucus. They look amazing in summer with pink flowers against a purple leafy backdrop. But in spring they need pruning, and that means lots of wood needs to be chipped. Now, you may have noticed this pretty pink rhododendron in the background so far, and this is Rhododendron Christmas Cheer. It gets its name because it supposedly flowers at Christmas, but mine never does. It usually flowers in January, so it's a bit late this year, but it's producing a great show. It really brightens up the February garden, but by summer you won't even notice its existence when you visit. Another plant looking pretty in pink at the moment is this Virginia, or elephant ears. It echoes the rhododendron's colours and provides a cheery welcome to any visitors coming up my drive. Further along the drive, just behind the heucheras and newly planted rhododendron Lady Alice Fitzwilliam, we have one of my favourite primroses. This little fellow is a vigorous pink called Avondale. There's also a clump of snowdrops that has decided to flower much later than the main ones. Look how sturdy these little things are. They really don't let the wind bully them. Further along this stretch we have my hellebore bed. I adore hellebores and have a lot of different ones in the garden. They're sometimes called Lenten roses. Most of them are planted together in this bed so that I have one concentrated display in spring. But unless you get out in early spring to tidy up your plants, you'll see no flowers. Let me explain. The leaves of the hellebores obscure the emerging buds. They're usually quite tired by spring with dark and diseased blotches, so you need to cut them off. Cut them all off except for those on very young plants or recently planted plants. I have a video about how to do this which I'll link to above. I got out early and cut back my hellebore leaves. The longer you leave it, the trickier the job is because you'll need to avoid cutting off the flower stems. But hellebores are worth a little trouble because they're such beauties and they flower long before anything else in the garden and for such a long time. I can even hear the odd buzzy bee around them. Another job I did was to weed my hellebores and top dress them with my homemade leaf mould. I never have enough compost or leaf mould for my garden's needs, but leaf mould is like gold dust to me and only goes on my most precious plants. Another plant that needs attention early in the season is this Omphalodes or navelworth. It produces sprays of small blue flowers in spring, but just like with hellebores, you don't see any flowers unless you act now and remove the leaves. Hyacinths are budding up nicely too, and this aroid with marbled leaves is very welcome among the spring display. Another plant that's just coming into bloom now is the camellia. This Camellia williamsii is very tough and flowers reliably. This specimen is more than 20 years old and we brought it here from our previous address. It had begun to break under the weight of its own branches. We did a pruning job a while ago and I feel this bush will do better now. Don't mind that offensive blue rope down the bottom. You won't see it when the surrounding plants leaf up. I've done a fair bit of weeding and clearing in this particular area as there are a lot of early flowers that appear here and I want them to look their best. We even have some daffodils opening up, so spring really must be close at hand. And there are other primroses coming into bloom, the old reliables. I'll be concentrating on weeding and clearing around these little flowers over the next while so that they can be shown off to best effect. We also have the gloriously scented Daphne in flower. This bush is a vision when we get just a little bit of sunshine to show it off, but the scent from its flowers is really, really fantastic. I planted it here by my greenhouse door so that I get wafts of sweet scent whenever I go to check on my greenhouse plants. But gardening isn't only about the large showy bushes like this Daphne. It's also about the small, subtle things, and the plant that has brought me the most joy so far this year is the clumps of snowdrops I planted at the base of these mock orange bushes. They have mostly gone over now, but this is a view I see from my kitchen window, and it was such a treat to be able to enjoy the snowdrops without having to venture outside into the howling wind. We've also missed the little reticulated irises in flower, and these were absolutely gorgeous. Another tiny bulb that I planted just outside my kitchen window so that I could enjoy them from the comfort and warmth of indoors. Now these are beautiful blue flowers with yellow markings on the leaves, and they look really, really super in early spring if you can get out and weed around them so that you can see them off to best effect. But speaking of reticulate irises, here's a little shot of the planter that I planted up with these plants. Gosh, that's a lot of plants in one sentence, just last autumn. Now I planted 3 different varieties in this one pot, but all 3 have flowered at different times. Finally, there's a small matter that I want to update you on, and when I say small, I mean really small. Now you may recall that I planted up a patch of lawn with crocuses last autumn using the method of lifting sod and placing bulbs underneath it. The crocuses should then poke up through the grass. I must say I was apprehensive this spring for 2 reasons. The first was down to the experience of a fellow gardener who planted hundreds of bulbs in her lawn and the birds pecked them all out. What a shocking thought. So then, of course, when my more than 500 bulbs failed to show, but older crocuses of the same species planted in the garden did show, I began to worry. I'm very happy to say, however, that I need not have worried. One day, albeit later than expected, little tufts of green began to poke through the sod. These quickly turned into upright soldiers of purple, and it was just amazing to see these tiny things withstand all the weather that came hurtling at them through February. You may think this isn't impressive, but I disagree. The bravery and hardiness of such a tiny plant that can grow through grass, survive frost and snow, avoid the preying beaks of birds and the stormy wind. That is something truly amazing to me and something that makes gardening worthwhile. Over time, these little crocuses should seed and spread, and I may even plant just a few more because, hell yeah, this is what it's all about. Okay, finally we're going to take a look inside my greenhouse and check out those bulbs and seeds I sowed last autumn. This is the unheated greenhouse. As you can see, I have a lovely display of the hoop petticoat daffodils here on the table. This little alpine daffodil looks fabulous in its pot and has flowered long before the ones in the garden have emerged. All the other pots are showing signs of life, and it looks like the hyacinths will be the next to flower. By the way, you'd never think I scrubbed all these clay pots just last autumn before I planted them up, but I did. The moss is a real indication of the dampness in the greenhouse, but it shouldn't do the bulbs any harm. And how have the seeds I sowed done? Well, I've just now potted on last autumn's cornflowers and marigolds, and they're doing well. My tiger lily bulbils, which were also sown last autumn, are now up and looking healthy and happy. And the primrose seed I sowed last autumn has also resulted in a number of healthy seedlings, so it'll be fun to see what colours and forms I get from these. And that brings me to the end of this February garden update, which I hope you enjoyed. I've linked here at the end to a couple of videos that you might find useful in your spring cleanup. Thank you as always for watching, and happy growing!